Hey everyone, it's Jen. Welcome back to Yarn Purpose. I'm back today with part 2 of my top-down sock knitting series. Today we're going to go ahead and cast on for our sock and knit the cuff. Hey everyone, it's Jen. Welcome back to Yarn Purpose. I'm back today with the second part of our sock knitting series for top-down socks. Today we are going to go ahead and cast on and work the ribbing of our sock. So the first thing we need to do though before we figure out the cast on is we need to figure out what size sock we need to knit. So I've written a basic top-down pattern for socks, and I've written it for 4 different sizes, and the way we're going to determine what size we're going to need is based on the circumference around the ball of your foot. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the sock here. I'm not going to show you my foot, nobody needs to see that, but you're going to measure the circumference of the ball of your foot. So you're going to take a tape measure and you're going to measure all the way around the ball of your foot to determine your size. Okay, so once you have that measurement, then you can go ahead and look at the pattern. In the description box below, there's also instructions on how to get started, and there's a link to the pattern as well on Ravelry. So once you have the circumference of the ball of your foot, now you'll be able to figure out what size you want to knit and how many stitches you need to cast on. However, because of the pattern is written for 4 different sizes, there's an inch difference between each size. So you might be like me and your foot falls in between 2 sizes. So what do you do then? My recommendation is if you fall between 2 sizes, so for example, my foot is 8.75 inches at the ball of my foot, then I'm going to go ahead and knit the 9-inch circumference sock. If you are right in the middle, so for example, if you have a foot circumference of 8.5 inches. If you're right in the middle, I would round down, but then if you're above the middle, go ahead and round up. Just right when you're in the middle, sometimes if you go up, you might find that your sock's a little bit too baggy, and knitting does stretch, so it's better in this case to go with that negative ease and knit the smaller size. So if you're right in the middle of 2 different sizes, round down, but otherwise just round up or down if you're in between. Okay, so everybody should know at this point what size sock they're going to knit. So now we can go ahead and cast on for our sock. So now you've measured your foot and you've determined which size sock you need to knit in the pattern. Now we're ready to go ahead and cast on using the German twisted cast on. I have shown this cast on my YouTube channel before, but I'm going to go ahead and show you again so we can get started on our socks. I'm going to go ahead and use thicker yarn and larger needles just so that you can see what I'm doing. You obviously will be doing the same thing for the number of stitches you need for your sock on your sock yarn and using your sock knitting needles. So let's go ahead and get started. So to do the German twisted cast on, we're going to start it like a long tail cast on. So the first thing we need to figure out is how much yarn we're going to need for this cast on. One tip I like to use is I like to take one of my needles and just sort of loosely wrap around 10 times. And then unravel that, and then know that will make about 10 stitches. So for your pattern, you know how many stitches you need, so then if that would be 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on. So that's how you can determine how much yarn you might need for your German twisted cast on. Then we're going to go ahead and start with a slip knot. We're going to take our needle and insert it in, so that will be our first stitch. Now we're going to go ahead and hold our yarn just like we're doing a long tail cast on, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to bring our needle under the yarn like this, through the hole over here, and then bring the needle back around here, untwist the loop, and bring it down through. And that made a stitch. Again, holding it just like you would a long tail cast on, except we're going to bring the needle down under both loops of yarn, through the hole, bring it around over to the yarn on your pointer finger, loop it around, untwist that X, bring it down here, and pull a loop through. So we're going to just keep repeating that process. And again, I'll link to my other YouTube video as well if you need a little bit more help with this. Okay, so you need to get your stitches on all of your double pointed needles. So you can cast on onto one double pointed needle the number you need and then split them up, but these particular double pointed needles are pretty short, so when you have 64 or even 72 stitches, once you start getting to those bigger sizes, it becomes a lot of stitches crammed on to the needle. What I really like to do is I'll do one more here. Once I have a quarter of the stitches on the first needle, I just literally pick up the second needle, hold it like this next to the first one, and just start doing my cast on onto the next needle. Simple as that. You might find it's a little wonky on the first stitch. Just go ahead and just pull it snug. And once you get around into your sock, you won't even be able to see a difference. You can see there's where we're joining from one needle to the next. And then I'm just going to go ahead and continue with my German twisted cast on until I get another quarter of the stitches onto the needle for whatever size you're knitting. We're going to introduce the third needle, again doing the same thing. Just continue my cast on onto the next needle. This can feel a little tricky at first. This is definitely one of those things that practice makes perfect. So don't let it frustrate you if you're not getting it on the first try. It's just going to take a little bit of practice. And really, if you still have a problem with it, you absolutely can cast on all your stitches onto one double pointed needle and then slip them onto the other double pointed needles once you have all your stitches cast on. Okay, so now you have the correct number of stitches on your double pointed needles. On needle 1, you want to have a quarter of your stitches. On needle 2, you want to have a quarter of your stitches. And then on needle 3, you have half of your stitches. So for example, if you are knitting the medium size that has 64 stitches total, you would have 16 stitches here, 16 stitches here, and then 32 stitches over here. So whatever size you're knitting, that's how it's split up, a quarter, and half. Now we're ready to go ahead and join in the round. The number one thing that you want to remember when you're joining in the round is do not twist your stitches. So we're just going to go ahead and get arranged here. So I just like to make sure that the tiny bit of fabric I created from my cast on is all sort of just facing up towards me, and I just verify that nothing appears to be twisted. So now that we've verified that nothing is twisted, we can go ahead and start knitting in the round. And we're also going to want to place a stitch marker. The way I like to do it is I like to go ahead and work my first stitch. In this case, it's going to be a knit. And I just want to really tighten down on that stitch. And then I'm going to go ahead, take my removable stitch marker, and I'm just going to link it into the fabric in between that last stitch. And then this is the first stitch I've just worked in this round. So now we're just going to work the cuff. For this particular pattern, I have just done a simple knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. So that's what we're going to do all the way around. So I already knit my first stitch here. Now I'm going to knit my second stitch. So that's my knit 2. Now I'm going to bring my yarn to the front and purl 2 stitches. Bring the yarn to the back and knit 2 stitches. So I'm just repeating that process all the way around. Depending on how your stitches are split up, when you get to the end of one needle, you're just going to go ahead and move to the next needle and just do whatever stitch you need to do. So in this particular case, this is just my example. I have my knit 2 here, and then I have 1 purl here, so I need to continue this with a purl. and then knit 2, purl 2. And just keep continuing like that all the way around till you get back to the beginning where your marker is. We've come to the end of our round, and we know that a couple different ways. First of all, our tail from our cast on is here, but also we put that stitch marker here to mark it. And you can see we marked our round by hooking it into the fabric so that way it won't fall off when we're moving between needles. So now that we've gotten to the end of the round, we're just going to continue knitting our cuff. For this particular pattern, I have you working the ribbing round, which is knit 2, purl 2 for a total of 20 rounds. So we already did it for 1 round, so we just need to do it for 19 more. The important thing to remember when you're knitting with double pointed needles is that you want to try to prevent ladders from forming in your fabric between where you're switching needles. So the way I avoid that in my sock is when I knit the first stitch, I do pull it snug, and I do the same thing again when I knit the second stitch, I pull it snug. And then I just continue working. So for my particular little swatch here that I'm just using for demonstration, now I need to start this needle with the purl. So it's still just the same thing. Whatever that first stitch is, you're just going to make sure that you tighten it a little bit and then do the same thing on the second stitch. Just tighten it a little bit. And that will really help you from forming ladders in your sock, because you want your sock to be one nice continuous fabric. So there we go. We've worked our second round of our cuff of our sock. So we're going to just go ahead and do that for 18 more rounds. Okay, so once you've completed the 20 rounds on your sock, you're going to go ahead and just have this little ribbing part of your sock. So that's going to be it for today. We'll be back next week to talk about the leg of the sock. I'm really excited that we finally got started on our sock knitting this week. If you liked this video, go ahead and give it that thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more from me, including the rest of these sock knitting videos, be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you like, you can turn on notifications to be notified whenever I upload a new video. That's it for me for this week. I hope everybody has a great week and that you enjoyed your intro to sock knitting. And I'll see you next week with the next video. Bye!